where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me, of course, today is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and it is 10 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States, which means everybody stop doing whatever you're doing, no matter how important, performing brain surgery or whatever, stop doing it, resume, in about an hour or so. But this is our joint weekly live stream. How are you, Peter?
No, I like how you started. It reminds me of how Fox News does the general election coverage. Yeah, you're watching the general decision 2024.
That's
Okay,
right.
Brent Baird haunting me in the back of my mind.
That's right. That's right.
I'm all right, everybody. But I was telling George earlier, I had what I call the COVID blitz. I got COVID yesterday for a full day, and now look at me. It's weird. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I'm still the one-eyed bandit. That'll be for another month or so. Get used to it. Okay. I do.
So, a number of things to talk about, and one thing, which is a continuation of what we were discussing on Friday, and that is the essential impasse after all the commotion of the past week with the big talk of security guarantees at an imminent summit between Putin and Zelensky, and then maybe Trump will join. All that is kind of fizzled out. That doesn't seem to be.
I would say even contrary. I think again, George and I stand alone. Prepare for more escalation. That really
yes.
social message that Trump sent out about sports teams and one side not being able to go on the offensive, but they play on the deep. I wish I had it in front of me. That bodes very badly, George.
I agree. I agree, and it's quite a remarkable thing, because of course there's also this report in the Wall Street Journal suggesting that in fact the United States has signed off on the sale of long-range missiles to Ukraine, but it says but they can't use it without American permission.
But so how do you be a mediator in a conflict like that?
You can't be a mediator. They're also, I think, passing words with the issue of authorization of use and the satellite technology that they need. They can't use these long-range missiles without satellite guidance systems. That's just, they can't do it. So I think they're doing some passing. Yeah, well, we didn't actually authorize the use of these long-range missiles, but we did provide satellite intelligence to guide the missiles.
Yeah, so you provided the benzene for the Zippo, but not the Zippo. Okay. Well.
Yes. Now, Lavrov was on NBC on Sunday, quite a lengthy interview. It's always very interesting. I find that in the media, whenever they want to get, say, the Russian view, which isn't often, but when they get they always go to a Russian government spokesman. So in other words, it's always that, because once you bring on a Russian government spokesman, then you say, well, of course he's going to say that. What do you expect him to say? That's what he gets paid to say. So it's a way of already telling the audience, well, don't pay any attention to this guy. That's he's earning his paycheck.
But yeah, so we have the truth and they have their propaganda.
That's right. Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. He's a propagandist. He's a paid propagandist. So that's why they never go to somebody who's who's an expert, but who's not on the Russian government payroll. They want to make sure never have that. So they have either Lavrov,
Roger Waters, get which I love.
That's another one.
I love him. He's one of my true heroes in life. But he's not a foreign policy expert. He's a foreign policy advocate, yes, and I love his advocacy. Right. But that's what they do. Susan Sarandon, get her.
Yes. That's exactly.
A fabulous actress. Fabulous. Okay. Right. But I'm just backing up George's point here.
That's exactly right. And it's funny that it was that actress who I don't particularly like. And I think she's kind of vanished now. Jean Garofalo. Remember, she was from about 25 years ago. Um, anyway, she was also she was very much opposed to the Iraq invasion, and she actually made the point. Well, it's very odd the way I'm always being now interviewed by CNN on the Iraq War. I mean, I mean, why are they picking on me? Well, of course, because essentially, they can dismiss what I say. Oh well, what do you expect? That's just she's just an actress. That's
Just
kind of what they would.
a scarecrow. That's what she is, right? Yeah,
That's it.
a
That's
character.
right. Anyway, so that was Lavrov um, speaking, and let's take a look at a little bit of his uh, interview.
Now is Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Mr. Foreign Minister, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you. And
Thank you
welcome
so
to
much
meet
for
the Russian
joining us.
diplomats.
Thank you so much for joining us after a very significant week. Let's dive right into the state of these talks. Has President Putin committed to a one-on-one meeting with President Zelensky?
What does that matter?
Well, those are the speculations which are being
But that's what you exactly. What does it matter? Because this is how they frame issues, as if that's the only issue that matters. Well, has he committed to meeting
The first question
Zelensky?
is, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, thank you for joining us. How does Russia envision a end of this war and a just peace? Go ahead, Mr. Foreman. That would have been a good opener.
That would have been a good opening. Exactly. That's because that's really the answer that you want. That's the answer what you should be looking for. That's what the audiences who don't know the Russian position, you want to basically, find out what they said. Instead, it's like the Americans set the agenda, and having set the agenda, so what do you want to say about that?
She never blinks. That's exactly what I've been thinking about. That's what I want. I said, don't give her caffeinated coffee, but the fact is she never blinks. That's right. Good observation. Before you continue, George, shout out to Colorado. I grew up as a small boy in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, so we have someone in Colorado watching us today. Keep going.
By, first of all, Mr. Zelensky himself and his European sponsors. It was not discussed in Anchorage. It was raised.
I'm sorry, but sponsors.
Yes,
Sounds like you're pimps. Okay, that's what it sounds like. That was engineered that way. He's I met him. He's a very, very smart guy.
He speaks English very well, but he speaks with a very heavy accent. I mean, so it's his sentence construction is perfect. He doesn't make any mistakes, but he does have this very thick Russian accent.
Well, I was at a conference with him in Valdai many years ago, and Valdai is official, semi-official. It's kind of blurs the lines, and he was doing a Q&A, and the translation was taking a lot of time, and he just said, "Stop it! I'll answer the questions." Okay, he's a very pragmatic guy too.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Thing which is kind of impromptu, appearing from the meeting in Washington between President Trump and his guests. Putin received the call of President Trump after that meeting, and he clearly stated that we are ready to continue the negotiations, direct Russian-Ukrainian negotiations, which started in Istanbul and already had 3 rounds convened there. And he said that meetings at the top level, the summit meetings, especially between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine, must be very well prepared. So preparatory process must be agreed. And for this, we suggested to raise the level of delegations who were meeting and will be meeting in Istanbul to address specific issues which need to be brought to the attention of the President Putin and Zelensky. And those issues relate both to humanitarian, military, and to political matters. Last time our delegations met in Istanbul, we suggested to create 3 working groups, including on political matters. More than 1 month passed already, there is no response from the Ukrainian side. And when Mr. Zelensky says the immediate priority is my meeting with Putin, well, it's basically a game. A game he is very good to play because he wants theatrics in everything he is doing. He does not care about substance. And it is not by chance that now they try, I mean, the Ukrainians and the Europeans who attended the meeting.
George, can you just stop it for a second? Interesting. He doesn't denigrate Zelensky. He doesn't. Well, why should we talk to an illegitimate president? Okay, he claims to have your values. Those values are destroying churches, opposing. See, he doesn't go down that path.
Right, but he does.
Important because all of the questions that he always gets are, well, when did you stop beating your wife?
Right. No, that's right. But he does distinguish, I think, later on in the interview between meeting Zelensky, which the Russians will do, and signing some kind of a treaty with Zelensky, which the Russians won't do. They say, yes, we don't accept that he's legitimate. However, he's the de facto president, so we will meet him. But if it comes to signing something, then we will raise the question of whether he's the legitimate president, and therefore whether he has the legal authority to sign any document binding.
Yeah, but my point is, he answers the question with great clarity and amazing detail, which she's not expecting, because I doubt she understands much of what he's saying. Keep going.
You're right.
To distort what was discussed in Anchorage between President Trump and President Putin regarding, in particular, the security guarantees. I read some Bloomberg reports yesterday and today saying that the negotiations between US and Russia on security guarantees for Ukraine have been, in fact, undermined because of the demands by Moscow to include the principle of indivisible security. It's a very telling statement. Indivisible security.
George, can you stop? I'm sorry. Okay, the indivisibility of security. This is absolutely key. Do you want to take a wager? Does she understand even that term, where it came from, what it means?
Right.
Because well, in all fairness to the foreign minister here, you're talking so many levels higher than that audience even can comprehend. What is that, a Putin talking point? Indivisibility of security? See, that's how it's going to be spun.
Right. No, I think that's right. But of course, in a way, it's a part of the problem that they say these things, indivisibility of security, that we understand, but mainstream media do not understand or don't want to understand. And so they don't really, so the audience kind of looks at it and say, I don't know, what do you mean by that? And so I think that it's a problem, it's maybe they should explain more. Indivisibility of security means that you can't just simply, only concern yourself with your security, and not worry about the security of your neighbor. And that's the issue of the indivisibility of security. But when he says that, people go, well, what does that mean? Oh, that just sounds like one of these Russian jargon. It's a cute expression, but it kind of does need to be explained. What does that mean, indivisibility of security, and why NATO has deliberately ignored that principle?
Enshrined in many documents adopted by consensus at the summits of Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, in particular, in Istanbul in 1999 and in Astana in 2010. This principle goes like no one can strengthen his security at the expense of security of others. No organization in the European space can pretend to dominate in military and political matters.
Can you hold on for a sec, George?
Mhm.
Does he have an earpiece in his ear? Because I think you're talking to him. I feel like I'm talking to George. You've done this many, many times. You've gone through Astana. You've done this many times with me before. Remarkable,
Right.
remarkable rendition. Minds think alike. I don't know. Keep going.
So somebody, I don't know, when we were talking the other day about how these leaders are talking about these security guarantees, and we're going to, put boots on the ground, and you said, well, why don't you do it now? Don't wait. Do it now. And I said, yeah, get a gun, get a backpack, and off you go. I mean, what's stopping you? And then somebody said, "Oh, that's very funny you said that, because even as you were speaking, Salvini, the Italian, said exactly that about Macron. Yeah, get a gun, get a helmet, and off you go. Don't send Italians to Ukraine."
And on top of that, I was told that he used a very kind of lowbrow language. So it translates very straightforward. But I mean, apparently it was very lowbrow the way he was delivering it. Okay.
Yes.
So exactly. What's stopping you? Apparently you can land in Kiev in complete safety after 3.5 years of war. Go ahead.
That's right.
Has been doing exactly the opposite. So when we are accused that by flagging the principle of indivisible security, we are undermining the process of negotiations between U.S., Russia, and Ukraine, this means that the people admit that they want divisible security, that they want security built for Ukraine, which is being discussed now, but built against Russia. Those discussions, which took place yesterday, before yesterday, after the Washington meeting, they clearly indicate that people see security as only security for Ukraine, and they are prepared to send intervention force, occupying force, to the Ukrainian territory to deter Russia. They don't conceal that this is the goal.
So that in fact, they don't conceal. That was when we were talking the other day. Macron said exactly that. That's the goal. Now, the question that arises: why would they think that Russia would ever accept something like this? I mean, the whole idea that Russia would accept essentially NATO deployment in Ukraine when they've been fighting for 3.5 years to prevent a NATO deployment in Ukraine. Now suddenly they're going to turn around and say, yeah, that's fine. And American air power as support, yeah, that's good with us. We don't have a problem with that. I mean, it's just insane that they're going around, and they're still going around talking about this. They're still talking about these security guarantees.
Everyone, keep in mind, George and I will give you a real world historic example of what Lavrov is talking about. Nikita Khrushchev, in a very risky gamble, at the invitation of Fidel Castro in Cuba, medium-range missiles, nuclear-tipped, were sent to Cuba with their Soviet advisors and technicians. This was discovered by by accident, because the U.S. Air Force and the CIA were battling over who should be looking over Cuba. They stopped for a few days, and when they sorted that out, they went, "Oh my God, they've already set them up." I mean, it was very, very quickly. Why am I bringing it up? Because this is Russia is saying, you claim, the Soviet Union, not the Russian Federation, Soviet Union put in offensive weapons on an island 90 miles from the mainland of the United States. That is the divisibility of security. That means it was at the expense of American security. And Kennedy said no. And that's why they had a quarantine. We avoided the Third World War. But see, this is one of the reasons why the concept of indivisibility of security came into being, and it was put into it was made into international law through the Helsinki process. You cannot you cannot enhance your security at the expense of another's. And this almost always means in the case of a neighbor. Okay.
That's right.
So this was something that was accepted by NATO members, not NATO itself. George and I did a complete video on this. I don't think NATO was ever mentioned in those documents. So Lavrov is saying, you didn't like it, and we understood that, but you're doing that to us. But you don't think you cannot see how we see that is a detriment to our security.
Well,
Maybe
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's exactly right. And of course, we know that had the Russians not said we will dismantle and remove the missiles, then we know what would have happened next. Now, either the United States would have invaded the island and just simply dismantled the missiles, or they would have just simply bombed. They would have just simply bombed the island, and then they would have invaded and removed Castro. Nobody in the West thought, oh, America's behaving unreasonably. They're violating the sovereignty of Cuba. Somehow, hey, Cuba has a right to, go into, And remember, Cuba cited its own security. It said, look, we were invaded in 1961, just a year earlier, we were invaded from the United States. This is our security. We're trying to, our security guarantees to prevent another invasion from the United States. So that's why we agreed to this deployment of these missiles. Nobody thought, oh, that's a good argument. Well, no, we're just going to go ahead and take out these missiles. No one's even asking about, does Cuba have a right to its own defense? Does it have a right to forge a military alliance with whomever it wants? Nobody asked that. And no one in France asked that. No one in Great Britain asked that. It was just like, yeah, of course the Americans are going to do this.
And keep in mind, Lavrov mentioned the Istanbul process. Again, I can't gauge if an American audience watching this program even knows what that is. They might know the latest meetings, but I don't know if they're aware of the 2022 process. Russia, in the working document that was about to be inked, brought up the issue of security guarantees for Ukraine, which would include Russia and even possibly China, as well as other countries. I think actually Western countries.
They said the permanent, all of the permanent members of the UN Security Council, plus maybe they would be ready to include Germany and Turkey. But what they said was there would have to be a consensus among the guarantors that Ukraine's security was under attack. I mean, in other words, you can't. Otherwise, it's just going to be NATO. I mean, it's like, if just the NATO powers can make a decision, oh, Ukraine's under attack, therefore Article 5, then that vitiates the whole point of having a number of guarantors. And that was the thing in Istanbul. Ukraine was ready to sign on to that. I mean, that was the key moment was Boris Johnson, obviously acting on behalf of the Biden administration, but that was the moment, because Ukraine was ready to sign on to something that would have been a reasonable deal, and how many lives could have been saved?
Yeah, and as George pointed out, all this talk about security guarantees is, again, just another iteration of the NATO backdoor. So, we have security guarantees today. Tomorrow, the war will start because the Brits will say, somebody threw a brick at me. We're at war. Okay?
That's right.
And again, George set it up perfectly. Have the United Nations Security Council, where they have to have an agreement. One cannot have the power to say, of the Security Council, France agrees that hostilities have been restarted. We go to war. Again, these people are so fundamentally dishonest.
That's exactly right. That's the point about the UN Security Council, that it doesn't matter if 4 out of 5 permanent members have agreed on something. That one permanent member, that his view prevails. You may not like it, but that view prevails because that's the way it was set up, that the great powers would have a veto power on anything that mattered to them, on an existential matter. This is pretty important for Russia. Absolutely, Russia will have a veto power and not just simply allow NATO to do whatever it wants. And after all this time, NATO is still talking in these terms.
Well, I mean, you have Anchorage, and then you have the transatlantic booty call in the Oval Office. Trump has gone way beyond the ceasefire, and then Mertz. No wonder Maloney was rolling her eyes. Why are you talking about a ceasefire? I mean, I'd be rolling. Everybody gives her a bad rap. Okay,
Yes.
I think she rolls her eyes for a good reason. I'm on her side.
Right, no, that's talking about the ceasefire. Mind you, then she came up with this nonsense of the Article 5 without actual membership. So
I think that she thinks that she's super clever.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I want to just move on maybe a little
All
bit.
right, I keep interrupting.
Yeah, keep. Let's listen to her a little bit more.
Is President Putin willing to meet with President Zelensky? Is that the plan?
Look, I hope
So after all that, he's given this long explanation. Totally. I mean, it's like, come on. Oh, is he ready to meet up? After everything that he has said, she still comes up with that same question.
Okay, well, I would say, let me put it to you, a mouthpiece for American empire. If we meet, will you stop sending arms to Ukraine? Will you stop asking about NATO? Will you
Right.
stop? Just stop. If you just want a meeting, maybe we can talk.
And then she goes on.
Look at his body language. It's like, here we go.
Yes, that's always that's right. And then it's like it was very funny when she was going on about. Is this it? Okay.
but to go in this semantic, exercise.
No, it was a little bit when she was asking about that factory that was hit that was making coffee makers, and she was just like, "Oh, just making coffee makers."
I didn't see that. She asked about coffee makers.
Well, because there was this factory that the Russians hit, and immediately Ukraine claimed, "Oh, this is
Well,
just
it's
coffee
about
makers."
the same time here, right before the Anchorage meeting. Three buildings, factories that were building German Taurus missiles were destroyed. Yeah.
Right, but she just sort of accepts this. Let's see if we could just.
And political decency you have to respect.
Okay, and Mr. Foreign Minister, we have a lot to get to, so I do want to keep moving. Just this week, Russia bombed an American-owned factory near the Hungarian border. I've spoken to people who frankly see that as a slap in the face to President Trump, to the entire peace process, isn't it?
Well, I would say that those who are sincerely interested in understanding what is going on should know by now that never ever Russia deliberately targeted any sites which are not linked to military abilities of Ukraine. It's
This is an electronics factory, though, sir. This is an electronics factory. I've spoken to people on the ground there. It builds coffee machines, among other electronics. This is not a military site.
Well, I understand that some people are really naive, and when they see a coffee machine in the window, they believe that this is the place where coffee machines are produced. Our intelligence has very good information. We target only, as I said, either military enterprises, military sites, or industrial enterprises directly involved in
George,
producing
give it a quick pause, okay?
equipment for Ukrainian.
Okay, just as an observation on my part, and I'm speaking a little bit out of school because I don't usually talk about military things, but an enormous amount of footage that I've seen coming out of Ukraine about destruction of buildings, those missiles or bombs that allegedly Russia is using must be not that powerful, because you see a lot of damage, you don't see a lot of destruction. The reason I'm bringing it up, and maybe for military experts out there, it seems to me the destruction you see quite often is the debris from missiles being destroyed
Yes.
in the air,
Yes.
because what it looks like is doing the damage.
Yes.
I mean, the Russian arsenal is very, very powerful, and actually the envy of the West, because Russia has been without nonstop, but improving its weaponry and weapons that work, not like American junk that doesn't work, that's very expensive. I just wanted to throw that as an observation. Have you thought about it as well?
Well, that's the point. That when they say, "Oh, Russia targeted a I don't know, children's hospital," and then they say, "Well, hospital, yeah," but what probably happened was that the Ukrainians launched an anti-missile or a drone to hit the Russian missile, and this is the debris that is a result of the hit or the failed hit or whatever. But it's very, very unlikely that Russia targeted, a cancer hospital. I mean, that's why would they do that? What would be the point? So I think it's the debris from a failed anti-missile launch.
Agreed.
Yeah. Anyway, so what is it? Let me so we just bring that. Yeah, and then. But it's just funny. We'll just see this to the end, because she just kind of goes on and on at him.
For Ukrainian army, and on the contrary, I never recall any concern expressed by the media in the West regarding the activities of Ukrainian armed forces when they, for example, in the Kursk region, when they invaded it one year ago, there is no military targets at all. All the targets which they have been hitting daily are civilian. They, by the way, took civilian hostages from there who had nothing to do with the conflict. Recently, they undertook the third attempt to blow up the Crimean Bridge. They attacked a few days ago another nuclear power station. They used to attack the one in Zaporizhia. Now they attacked the nuclear power station in Smolensk. And they continue to do this. They continue to exercise terrorist attacks. There is no other way to call them. So, if you believe that if there is American capital in an enterprise which is used to produce weapons to kill Russians, and you believe that, be it American, be it Hungarian, be it anybody's capital, that this gives impunity to those who build weapons to kill us? I don't think so. I don't think this is fair. This is kind of, I would say, imperialistic.
Yes, Mr. Foreign Minister, just to confirm, you are confirming that Russia did in fact target and attack the American-owned company that was hit this week.
You should be professor in the Soviet universities, because you twisted very interestingly what I said. I did not say that I confirmed that incident. I never heard of it. I just asked a rhetorical question. Do you believe that if there is an enterprise producing weapons and being part of the Ukrainian military machine, intended to produce things,
Lavrov spanking,
and just because this enterprise happened to have some American capital in it, it should be immune? That was my question.
All right. So there you get the thrust of the interview, and it's clear
nitwit. She's such a nitwit.
She's a nitwit. Yeah. She at least seems like a nice person, unlike the other one, the Margaret Brennan, who yeah.
I'm convinced she's AI. Because she has no soul. You can see it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the other thing is that August the 24th was it's celebrated as Ukraine's Independence Day, and so Zelensky was kind of inundated with all these congratulations, and I really think that we need to address this point. Ukraine's declaration of independence is completely illegal. I mean, if we go through what happened, during the last 2 years of the USSR. If you recall, Gorbachev pushed through legislation in the spring of 1990, April 1990, the law of secession from the USSR. That was adopted by the parliament, the Congress of the People's Deputies, and it put forward a procedure that countries had to, although not the countries, republics had to go through in order to secede from the USSR. There had to be a referendum. That after you've had the referendum, there has to be a minimum of, I think, 2/3 of a vote in favor of secession. After that, you have to go to the Supreme Soviet of the USSR and discuss these issues. There's a 5-year cooling period, and all the minority republics within any individual republics would have also the right to hold referendums and decide on whether they wanted to secede. That was the law of the land in the USSR. Now, what then happened? We had in March 1991, Gorbachev held that referendum, the nationwide referendum, whether do you want the USSR to continue in some form or other. Overwhelming majority, I think something like 80% voted yes, we do. Now, Ukraine also made that declaration of state sovereignty, which really didn't mean anything. I mean, all that was is just saying, oh, well, we regard Ukrainian law as superseding federal law. But a lot of republics did. They all did that. Russia did that as well. It was just simply a declarative thing. Now, when Ukraine on August the 24th, 1991, declared that it was independent, it wasn't acting. I mean, it went against the law of the USSR, which was adopted in April 1990. You can't just get independence. And of course, the USSR did not accept that independence. They did accept, or at least they didn't object to the Declaration of State Sovereignty, because that was just simply, okay, that's just declarative. But it didn't have any effect. It didn't mean that they were leaving the USSR. But this Declaration of Independence was illegal. So it was a completely illegal. I mean, so all these people sending in the congratulations. No congratulations at all. The declaration was illegal. It's absolutely illegal. Ukraine is not independent.
And we discussed this on Friday. Okay, that's a point taken, George. But history moved on, actions moved on. For Russia to agree to this illegal secession, illegal declaration of independence, that Ukraine would be neutral, would not join a military bloc, it would not pursue nuclear weapons. So, I mean, the one after another. Okay, right. So de facto, okay, what can we do about it? And then they said, okay, fine, for us to recognize you as an independent country, separate from what was the Soviet Union, we have our demands, and they agreed to them, and they agreed to it until they didn't agree to it.
Right. No, I mean, the reason I'm bringing up this history means, first of all, it has no legal validity. So that's good. Therefore,
the breakup of the Soviet Union is
exactly.
dubious.
I mean, when Yeltsin and Shukevich, there was Kravchuk, and I think whatever the name of the Belarus guy, it was Shukevich or whatever his name was. The three of them, they said, well, we're just dissolving the USSR. Whoa, where does that? Where in the Constitution does it say that apparently a collection of republics can just dissolve the USSR?
The rumor is it was a very liquid meeting.
I think it was a liquid meeting. So that was that. So that's an illegality. So really, the only, I guess, legal document would be the Declaration of State Sovereignty, because at least there was, no one else other than all the Republicans did it. But Gorbachev, to the extent that we can understand what was going on in his mind in 1990, I think he was using this as maybe the part of the negotiation for this new loose confederation that he was hoping to create. I mean, I imagine. So he said, "Okay, fine. You want to make these declarations, but let's get down to the business of negotiating a new union state."
Brought up still another point why everybody hates Gorbachev. Gorby mania, Gorbachev. He's in Pizza Hut commercials. This guy is spat on here.
Right.
I mean, seriously, a superpower, and he worked it down to the size of a phone booth, his own. Okay,
Right.
I mean, he's despised here.
Right.
Yeltsin is despised here.
Yeah.
All the heroes in the West, they're despised. You say, oh, what about Andrei Sakharov? He was so great. No, he's despised too. He was a traitor. He gave away state secrets.
Yeah.
He's a traitor.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Just a short aside. I can remember when I was living in Poland. I was on a Fulbright scholarship, and Wałęsa, Lech Wałęsa was president at the time, and I made a quip to my landlord. I said, "Well, do you think Wałęsa is going to be any better than the communists?" And he said, "I don't know why you're asking me. You Americans created him. We didn't create him. He's your creature.
Right.
He's not ours."
Right. Yes.
Just cut through the BS, everyone. Sometimes just take an extreme opposite. Okay, just turn it upside down and say, does that make any more sense than the narrative that you've been fed all your life?
Right.
I'm sorry for that.
No, you're absolutely right. But then the question arises: both Gorbachev and Yeltsin worked their way through the Communist Party apparatus. They got to the very top. And this is what they did when they got to the top. They just simply,
that's an eternal mystery. That's an eternal mystery. How do people backstabbing, sabotage, brown nosing? They were great at all of that. And once they got power, when it was detached from the Communist Party apparatus, they were like blind kittens.
Right. Yes. They were. And therefore played right into the hands of the West.
The Harvard boys. Yeah.
That's right. They played in the hands of the West. But of course, something very similar happened in the case of Yugoslavia, because the two events were going, simultaneously. So the breakup of Yugoslavia and the breakup of the Soviet Union, completely illegal and unconstitutional. Because in Yugoslavia's case, the Constitutional Court of Yugoslavia had said, no, these secessionist claims are illegal. They're illegal under a Yugoslav constitution. And even so, even though that Yugoslav Constitutional Court made that ruling, the Western powers jumped in and said, yeah, well, we recognize, this is the one kind of constitutional legal authority. And so, but how does the West justify these things? Oh, well, they're just communists. Oh, what do we care what the Constitutional Court says? They're just, they're just communists.
And what it also does, George, it creates a precedent, okay, where the social good is determined by someone else.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, I'm the last person to defend communist regimes. I made my early career studying them and not being very impressed by them, to be honest. Okay, but George brings up a point. I mean, but it's for the greater good. You don't have communism. Whoa.
Right,
slow down, everybody. Slow down, because we're talking about what is the highest social good in these cases? Right. Sovereignty. That's the highest social good, and you're denigrating that because you're making you're choosing winners and losers.
Right. That's right. And of course, these governments, were basically the legal, legitimate governments at the time. And that's it. That's the legal, legitimate government. You may not like it, but they were the legal, legitimate governments. And so when a constitutional court rules that this is what the Constitution says, this was we had a whole process how we created this Constitution, and when you just simply unilaterally declare that you're out of here without bothering to negotiate anything, which you're supposed to according to the Constitution. In fact, according to every constitution in the world, then you basically, other Western powers had no business of interfering and rushing to recognize it. And so we see in the case of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, dissolution of Yugoslavia, how cynical and ruthless, one have to say, were very ruthless and opportunistic, the Western powers were. They ignored the rule of law. They ignored any kind of constitutional government. And the results, we see the results. The result was a war in Yugoslavia. It was entirely predictable. And then we've seen the series of wars that have taken place in the Soviet Union. I mean, the number of them. I mean, we're talking about the wars in Georgia. We're talking about the wars of Armenia and Azerbaijan. You got obviously now Ukraine, and then there may well be further wars down the road. This is a direct result of not following proper constitutional procedures. And the West did this. And the West did. They saw this is our opportunity. We're gonna make our move. The hell with law, the hell with constitutional. We're just going to exploit these crises to our advantage.
Okay, the argument can be made that George and I are being very, very pedantic here. Now, the reason why they had these rules and these laws and these processes was to avoid wars.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
If Nebraska leaves the Union, it doesn't mean that Oklahoma is going to go to war with you, okay?
Right.
But if you mess around in the Caucasus, you can almost guarantee there'll be a war.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's why, I mean, when Gorbachev just allowed this whole thing to, but when Gorbachev, at least when pushed forward for this law on secession, he put in this business about the minorities. The minorities would have their own referendum. Why? Because minorities should not be coerced into leaving the USSR if they don't want to. And I think that was the crucial point, and that was a crucial point, obviously, in Yugoslavia as well, where the West very cynically ignored minority rights and just simply said, "Well, the majority voted fine. We'll recognize it." Yeah, but what about minorities? Why should minorities be coerced?
The minority George is talking about are Serbs.
The Serb minority in Croatia, the Serb minority in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Oh well, we're just.
But they're Serb. They're
exactly,
Serbs.
They're Serbs. Exactly. And so that's why it only seems pedantic because the West deliberately paid no attention to any of these issues. And they just simply, hey, this is a fantastic opportunity, and we're ready to recognize anyone at all who wants out of the USSR.
So, Shred, any kind of rule of law, a conflict starts, aided and abetted by NATO countries, and then NATO comes in and solves all the problems for everyone. Hey, we save the day.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So it's so disgusting that they come along, all these powers of sending in their congratulatory telegrams to Ukraine. Oh, congratulations on your Independence Day. What Independence Day? You just because you made the declaration on August the 21st, 1991, it had no legal force whatever. It's like,
to extend George's overall argument, we have this illegal appearance of what people would call independent Ukraine, but that precedent opened up what could happen on the Maidan in 2014. You see how you break this rule? Well, rules are kind of elastic,
right.
Okay. And then then you have Maidan, you have an illegal coup government,
right.
And then the Minsk Accords. Well, the same kind of elasticity
right.
of independence of Maidan goes into Minsk, okay?
Yep.
And then you have corrupting forces like the OSCE. Obviously, yep. NATO has dirty hands here. Yep. See, it starts a trend, okay? Yep. It starts a trend.
That's exactly what happened. It started a trend. So they got away with that, and almost immediately they moved in, and ultimately the goal was always to get Ukraine into NATO, and the moves were begun in the 1990s. Long before Maidan. But then you got all the 1990s, and then the first attempt to overthrow a democratic government, that was 2004 with the Orange Revolution. So they overturned that election. Then they do that again in 2014. Each time you got the same people and think, yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter, that, oh, we got away with it last time, we're going to get away with it again.
I can remember Michael McFaul. He wrote a book on the Orange Revolution, and he was really excited about it. I remember all when I was still on Facebook. It's something like 2 weeks after it was published, Yanukovych came to power. Just that book didn't age too well, did
Right.
it?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. But that was the thing that they deliberately ignored. Just like they ignored minorities, they ignored the fact that Ukraine was an artificial creation, and it had very substantial minorities that had no interest at all in being part of the West, and certainly no interest of being part of NATO. They ignored that, just like they ignored the will of the Serbs in Yugoslavia, and so they basically, like, what were they thinking at the time of Maidan? They were thinking, we're going to get away with this. The Russians are just going to have to swallow it. They're not going to like it, but they're going to have to accept it.
But it was the reward was quite cold, at least initially, because I'm absolutely convinced that Victoria Nuland wanted to put up that NATO flag in Sevastopol. That would have been the really gratifying thing. And the good thing is that the Russians and the Russian people living in Crimea took very rapid action, and I think that really pissed off the Obama State Department, because they didn't get the initial prize.
No, they didn't get they didn't get the prize, but they managed to spin it out for a few more
years. I mean, some people are on really nice pensions right now. Can you imagine they huddle around in Washington D.C. or at Langley, like, man, you were part of the Ukraine project in the 1990s. Yeah, you're an original gangster. You were part of that. Victoria Nuland's clan. Okay.
Yeah,
to this day, George, they're very proud of their work.
Yeah. And that horrible woman in Canada, Chrystia Freeland, she even predates 1991. I mean, she was there in the 80s as essentially the CIA point woman in Ukraine, stirring up this.
In the early 2000s, she was pretty well known here, and I don't care who you were and what you were on the political spectrum. Mostly, obviously, Western journalists here. They're all liberal interventionists, NGO sympathetic, NGO adjacent, all of the garbage. That's why they hated me. But everybody knew that she works for intelligence. I mean, come on, everybody knew that. Everybody knew that.
Right.
And you knew that if you talked to her, you're talking to an intelligence asset.
Well, that's right. It was intelligence asset, of course. And she, came from this Ukrainian nationalist bandera.
Really interesting ideological pedigree. Let's put it that way.
Ideological pedigree, and she gets sent to Ukraine. So she's very young then. This is in the late 1980s. What was she doing in Ukraine? Well, we have a pretty good idea what she was doing. Stirring up all the bandera
and who her circle of friends were.
That's right. But she's gone on to
all those tattooed guys.
That's right. But she's gone on to success after success.
Of course.
And she even survived that. I've forgotten his name. What was the name of that Nazi who addressed the Canadian Parliament? I don't even know if he's still alive.
Go back, everybody, and look at the footage when he stood up for his ovation. You should have seen her. It was like, this is orgasmic. I've achieved what my grandfather never could have done. She was so happy with her.
That's right.
A Nazi is getting a standing ovation in the Canadian Parliament.
That's right. And that's right. But of course, what was so funny about that is that I don't know how much Trudeau knew about who this person was. She knew very well. She knew exactly who this person was. So when she was clapping, she knew exactly whom she was applauding.
Trudeau, I don't believe, knew who he was, but he knew his pronouns. What a nitwit!
Total. But they all survived. It's amazing. You kind of survive something like this. Some guy, some nonentity had to resign as if it was his fault. But Freeland didn't pay any price at all. So, well, that was a mistake. It was a mistake. Yeah. So you were
Oh,
applauding.
you remember how Trudeau explained it?
Well,
He blamed the Russians.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
He pivoted. Okay.
So Zelensky gave this one of his idiotic speeches on this on Independence Day. It's not we don't need to go through it in any detail. But what was striking is I go Maidan is that he seems to say that. Just like our Ukraine has withstood the great calamity that Russia has brought to our land, here at the 0 kilometer, this is the starting point where distances to Ukrainian cities are marked to our Donetsk, our Lugansk, our Crimea, and today these markers have an entirely different meaning. They are no longer just about kilometers. They remind us that all of this is Ukraine and our people are there, and no distance between us can change that, and no temporary occupation can alter that. And one day, this distance between Ukrainians will disappear, and we will be together again as one family, as one country. It's only a matter of time, and Ukraine believes it can achieve this secure peace across its entire land. Ukraine is capable of it. So he seems to be suggesting that Crimea is going to get Crimea back. I mean, that's quite a tall
I
order.
wonder about the people on the beach. Was it 2 summers ago where they were a victim of some kind of military strike, and the 14,000 people in Donetsk and Lugansk that suffered from the Ukrainian military for 8 years, and
Right.
not a peep from the West. Yeah, I'm sure they can't wait to renew their Ukrainian passports.
Right, but I thought what's striking about this speech is precisely that's we're supposed to be talking now about some coming to some kind of peace agreement. Bringing the fighting into a halt. That doesn't sound like peace talk. That I mean, if you bring Crimea, Donetsk, Lugansk, that's his agenda. And so and I guess his what was it what was the word Lavrov used? Not enablers. I can't use
Oh, I think sponsors.
sponsors exactly. So I guess they're in favor of that. But of course, in a way, it isn't surprising because I think, as we discussed last week, I mean, this is the plan. The plan is that okay, we'll accept something de facto, we'll get NATO in as security guarantors, and then we can start it up again. In 3, 4, 5 years time. So that's the agenda. I mean, very, very subtle, and the surprise why the Russians aren't buying it.
But it's just so transparent too, and that's why it's not going to cut any mustard here. Obviously, we need a ceasefire. Well, the losing side really wants the ceasefire. Okay, it's
Right.
not the other way around. Everyone, okay, and the Russians know this, and that's why there has to be a peace before there can be an end to the hostilities. And
Right.
that's usually how it works. Everyone.
Yes. Yes.
You know, the unfortunate thing for, I think, just normies out there, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way. People are busy. People have a hard time making a living. But World War II isn't a template for geopolitics. Okay, it's just not.
No.
War. 99% of wars in history have ended differently than they did in Berlin in 1945.
No, that's right. It's always been a very bad template, which is everybody's Hitler. Every time there's an agreement you don't like, it's Munich. Every time there's a settlement, it's Yalta. It's like that. That's your exclusive frame of reference, and then so that's always going to lead you into trouble. Now, just switching topics for a minute. I don't know if you know that Jared Kushner's dad.
Oh, I saw this.
Jared Kushner's dad who's a
Who
former.
was pardoned by
He was
Bill Clinton.
pardoned. You know, he spent time in prison.
Oh, no, was it Donald Trump that pardoned him?
Donald
Yeah.
Trump president. Yeah, I mean, okay, you know, Jared is his son-in-law. You're going to see why. Okay, you know, he he might pardon him, but that wasn't enough. He wasn't just pardoned. You know, he served his time, but he pardoned. He
He got a
became
sweet
ambassador.
deal. He got a
Yeah,
real
became
sweet
an
deal.
ambassador to Paris, which is a
Ooh,
very nice gig. I mean, you know, when in your retirement, your golden years, you know, you spend your golden years in Paris. There are worse ways to spend your golden years. But anyway, he's the ambassador to France, and of course, he's a fanatical Zionist, as is Jared, and of course, as is Jared's wife, was Ivanka Trump. And so Charles Kushner wrote a letter. He wrote an open letter in the pages of the Wall Street Journal to France, and that means to President Macron, accusing France of, guess what? Anti Semitism. um, yeah,
isn't it, everybody just, isn't it getting kind of stale?
I would have thought.
I mean, it's just, I'm just going to do a Maloney here. I don't know. I like her. I'm gonna defend her. Okay. I like it when she rolls her eyes.
Well, I do like people who have very expressive faces. I mean, it's just and particularly, you know, when she was meeting Macron, she obviously dislikes Macron, and you could
Right.
see the dislike on her face. She couldn't
He
hide it.
doesn't even stand close to him. Macron likes to stand next to men. Take that, at face value. He likes men, but
Right.
she's standing just she doesn't like him. Okay.
No, no, um, and um, and so here's this a letter to Emmanuel Macron. And here he's saying on the 81st anniversary of the Allied liberation of Paris, which ended the deportation of Jews from French soil. Well, that's an interesting way of formulating it. The Allied liberation ended the deportation of Jews from French soil. Um, I
That's your main takeaway from Normandy, right?
That's right, exactly. I write out of deep concern over the dramatic rise of anti Semitism in France and the lack of sufficient action by your government to confront it. So, this is an ambassador. So, he's representing the US government, and he's haranguing the president of France that, you know, about the lack of sufficient action by your government to confront it. And then it says anti-Semitism has long scarred French life. So I'm sure, you know, the French were happy to hear that. But it has exploded since Hamas's barbaric assault on October the 7th. Since then, pro-Hamas extremists and radical activists have waged a campaign of intimidation and violence across Europe. So these pro-Hamas,
Are they pro Hamas?
exactly, that's exactly that. There are not too many of them.
Well, I'd
Um,
like to see one example. Maybe there exists. I don't know.
Well, then it's a, and radical activists, which could mean almost anything. And then they say, you know, intimidate. And then in France, not a day passes without Jews assaulted in the street, synagogues or schools defaced, or Jewish-owned businesses vandalized. Your own interior ministry has reported anti-Semitic incidents, even at preschools. So
They always invoke children.
they
Always.
reach out, but again, you think, okay, what are these anti-Semitic? You see, they have this definition, and we talked about this already a number of times about the, you know, I assume he's going by this International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, which means pretty much any anything that an Israel supporter doesn't like gets called anti-Semitism.
Well,
Um,
maybe they don't like Israel.
Yes, that's right. So so he goes on, and as this in this, uh, yeah. So yeah, where are we? Oh, um, And then it says, boom, and then public statements haranguing Israel and gestures towards recognition of a Palestinian state embolden extremists, fuel violence, and endanger Jewish life in France. In today's world, anti Zionism is anti Semitism, plain and simple.
No, it's not plain and it's not simple. It's actually wrong.
It is wrong. So, gestures toward recognition of a Palestinian state, which incidentally, the overwhelming majority of the member states of the United Nations recognize. So, anything like that emboldens extremists, fuel violence, and endanger Jewish life in France.
You know, it's written. Go back, George, just for a quick second here. So, extremist fuel violence and endangers Palestinian lives. That's what I see. I see extreme violence against a virtually defenseless people.
Yes.
I mean, where's their Air Force? Where are their tanks?
No.
Where are their satellites? You know, where are their patrons?
Right. That's right. And so there was President Trump and I have Jewish children and share Jewish grandchildren. I know how he feels about anti-Semitism, as do all Americans. And then he directed the Education Department to enforce civil rights protections for Jewish students on university campuses.
Okay, this is where the right goes woke, everyone.
That's right. Now, always remember that Jewish students on university campuses are probably among the most pampered people in America. I mean, they're pampered. What they call anti-Semitic incidents is they're being exposed to arguments and protests that they don't like. So they say, oh, well, it's anti-Semitic, but basically they just don't like seeing people protesting on behalf of the Palestinians. And then
now that's plain and simple.
That's right. And anyway, so it goes on and on here. And then today, many French Jews fear that history will repeat itself in Europe. Parents encourage their children to emigrate. Surveys show most French citizens believe another Holocaust could happen in Europe. Most French citizens believe another Holocaust would happen in Europe. What are these surveys? I'd love to see who conducted this survey. Could it be the Israeli government? Nearly half of French youth report never having heard of the Holocaust at all. Well, if they've never heard of it, how can they also argue that the Holocaust could happen in Europe? I don't get.
Well, if we take that statement at face value, then that's a problem with the French educational system. Okay,
I doubt. Incidentally, I do not believe that for 1 minute. I don't believe any of these statistics he's claiming.
Pure hyperbole.
Yeah. Mr. President, I urge you to act decisively, enforce hate crime laws without exception, ensure the safety of Jewish schools, synagogues, and businesses, prosecute offenders to the fullest extent, and abandon steps that give legitimacy to Hamas and its allies. So this is, of course, Netanyahu had already said most of this in response to Macron's announcement that he's going to recognize Palestine. And then, and as U.S. ambassador to France, I stand ready to work with you and with leaders across French society to forge a serious plan that addresses the roots of anti-Semitism and defeats it. Oh, that's good. So we'll have an American plan for how to reorganize French society. That's guys. Anyway,
I mean, okay. Obviously, this is ahead of the expected French recognition of a Palestinian state. Now, this is obviously part of the rollout against that.
Yes.
But this is so counterproductive. Why do some of the most privileged people in the Western world need protections? Excuse me?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
That's right.
And also the education. Look, when I was at university, I was the odd guy out. I was always way more conservative than my peers. And I had to put up with it. It's their opinion. And I said, It's the way you think. I
Right.
don't think that way.
Right.
But that's the way it is. It's idea versus idea.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And respect
Yeah.
for people with different points of view. It was hard.
Right.
For me, it was hard, but I
Yeah.
persevered. Okay.
Yes.
So, being called names and being associated with people that obviously you don't want to be associated with, but
Right.
that's part of the educational process.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. But you see, what they call anti-Semitic, you remember that incident where this young woman, she's just a female student, knocked the telephone out of the hands of a student who was wearing an IDF shirt. He just, she didn't like being filmed by him. She knocked his phone out of his hands, and right away, the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, says, "This is shocking, horrific. The DOJ is going to investigate this woman. So let's ruin her life. She's all of 20 years old. We'll make sure we'll ruin her life, prosecute her for what exactly? She knocked the phone out of this young man's hands, and they're ready to do this because it's anti-Semitic. It's a hate crime that she committed.
Yeah, there was, I saw a clip earlier today of Rabbi Shmuley. Yeah, I know. He was visiting the building where Anne Frank, part of the great story of. I mean, most of it's legend, but
Yes, it is.
it's we can talk about that later. And so he's doing. He's. Oh, did you know who he was accusing of anti-Semitism? Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro. Well, that's
you got to watch it. Okay, so he's basically Ben Shapiro is hiring anti-Semites that deny the Holocaust, and of course Shmuley, in his egotistical manner, so he's holding the phone in front of him, and then he notices out of the corner of a guy filming him, and essentially says, "You don't like Jews." He said, "No, I like your Ray-Bans, man. I like your glasses. No, you're an anti-Semite." Okay? Just insanity.
That's
okay.
Right. Yeah. But Shmuley.
Hey, put it on either on X or on his Facebook. Check it out.
Anyway, so the French government put out, I think a fairly feeble response. And France has taken note of the allegations made by the United States ambassador, who, in a letter to the President of the Republic, expressed his concern about the rise of anti-Semitic acts in France and reported an alleged lack of sufficient action by the French authorities to combat it. France firmly refutes these latest allegations. The rise in anti-Semitic acts in France since October the 7th is a reality that we deplore and against which the French authorities are demonstrating total mobilizations, as these acts are intolerable.
I think just 2 words would have sufficed.
Exactly. This is
piss off.
Exactly. But this is a pathetic response. But then he says the ambassador's allegations are unacceptable if they violate international law, particularly the duty not to interfere in the internal affairs of states.
Well, welcome to Russia's world.
That's right, as set out in the 1961 Vienna Convention governing diplomatic relations. And they also fall short of the quality of the transatlantic relationship in France and the United States and the trust that should result from it between allies.
Are we going to keep using the word allies, George?
Yeah, that's right.
Tired of that?
But this thing is now, passé. I mean, this guy who was the ambassador, the American ambassador to Hungary, he was always interfering in Hungary's internal. I mean, he would deliver regular speeches.
That guy was a piece of work. He was doing the Rainbow Coalition thing.
Right, exactly. He came to Hungary, with his husband and children. Basically, knowing Hungary is, it's a conservative country, but he goes there with his. With his husband, and the Biden administration appointed him, and they knew this would be a problem. But he would never let anything go. He would always be making speeches denouncing Orban. But no one was protesting then. This violates the 1961 Vienna Convention on diplomatic relations. Anyway, let's take a look at our the Gagglers and see what the are members of our locals community, and these are the people who keep this community going, and above all, they make sure that the dogs are kept fed, happy, and are not going to get into one of their bad moods, which is always problematic.
They
Anyway,
get in a bad mood when I'm doing this podcast because that's when they get up to their trickery.
yes.
I see you, but Apple's over there. He's plotting. He's plotting.
Plotting. You see, this is not good when they're plotting. That's always a bad sign. Um, and then DJ 53144. Thank you very much for your contribution. Really appreciate it. Now and then DJ asks a question for you, Peter. He says, Peter, what's the skinny on vapes being banned in Russia?
I saw that. It's being heavily debated right now. They're going to probably allow it because the argument, and I think the correct argument, is it will just go into the black market, and then you have no idea what's being dumped on the market. I know it's a bad habit, but I can't go back to tobacco. I just can't do that. So far, so good. I'll leave it.
All right. And then Cynthia, always very happy to see you. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Really appreciate it. So Cynthia says, in my opinion, no one should understate the immense importance that language plays in power politics. So it's a shame that Ukraine hasn't done what Belarus has done, which is to adopt two official languages, not just one, as Ukraine unfortunately has done. In fact, war could have possibly been averted if Ukraine had simply allowed the Russian language to become its second official language. Well, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it was always, in a way, Ukraine kind of got off to a bad start by essentially, banning Russian as an official language. I mean, people could speak Russian, but it was banned as an official language, given that it had been the official language throughout the USSR. And so in a way they got off to a bad start, and they never really recovered from that bad start. And then of course what has gone on since then was even in parts of Ukraine, which is completely Russian speakers, even then they wouldn't allow Russian as an official language. I mean, this was the first act after the ouster of Yanukovych.
But before the Maidan coup, I used to go to Kiev very often. I love that city. It's so nice. The only language you heard in Kiev was Russian. It wasn't Ukrainian.
Yep.
In the capital of Ukraine, it was a Russian-speaking city.
Right. Yep. That's right. That's right. And but to go ahead and to prevent, in those parts, particularly in the Donbass and in Crimea, to prevent Russian being the official language there, an official language there, was so provocative. It was that you knew that this was going to end in disaster. So it was a really, and one has to say this was pretty much throughout the USSR. I mean, it's like other than Belarus, Russia, and Kazakhstan. I mean, most of the republics, just wouldn't have Russian as an official language, which just showed, how much they discriminated against the Russian population. Wouldn't have been. I mean, why? What do you achieve by preventing it from being an official language? No one is saying you have to speak this language. Just an official language. What do you achieve by it other than to discriminate against Russia?
One of the things Zelensky did when he was running for president, and you and I remember it really, really well because he spoke in a different language, resolving the issues with the Donbass, resolving the issues with the East, resolving issues with the Russian minority in the country and the Russian majority in the East. He spoke Russian to them.
Yes.
Okay, he used their language.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons why he got elected.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Anyways, and then Cynthia goes on. It's also ironic that in order for Ukraine to gain EU membership, it had to do a better job protecting the language rights of its minorities including its Russian citizens. That's the theory, but of course, no one is being held to that demand. So in 2023, Ukraine passed legislation indicating that it would do so, but in reality, it proved to be only vaporware at best. But at the same time, the EU didn't criticize, much less penalize Latvia for discriminating against its Russian-speaking citizens, prompting many of them to relocate to Russia. No, I
Well,
mean
look,
that. Yeah,
look at
go.
the standing of the Orthodox Church. Where's the EU there?
Right,
Where's the EU there?
right.
Okay. Well, where is the EU on the Hungarian minority in Ukraine? Where are they?
No, no, not at all, not at all. Um, and exactly because the EU is supporting that policy. They want the Russians to be driven out of those places. They want it pushed out of the Baltic states. They want the Russians, they wanted the Russians gone from Ukraine. I mean that's the EU policy. So it's in a way it's not just that Russia is that the EU is ignoring human rights. Basically, you're pursuing the policy that the EU wants. It's like when we were talking the other day about the bombing of the pumping station on the Lavrov pipeline. Oh, what's the EU going to do about it? Well, the EU is not going to do anything about it because Ukraine is doing exactly what the EU wants it to do. That's right. So this the discrimination, this outrageous discrimination is pursuing. Yeah, that's exactly what we want.
And the world doesn't exist in a vacuum. George is absolutely right. During the 8 years from the Minsk process all the way to the start of the special military operation, you hear all this verbiage and garbage about human rights, language rights, minority, and the people in Donbass, as their houses are being blown to smithereens. And where are those values for us?
Right. Right.
And then remember, everyone, the Donbass was completely blockaded.
Right.
You couldn't go. There was a contact line. They shut down the banking system there. You couldn't get seals for burials, for marriages. They were completely cut off from the rest of Ukraine. And Zelensky wants them back? Really?
Yeah.
This is 10 years of war against these people.
Yeah.
This didn't start in 2022.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly. But the interesting thing about the language rights is that the West makes up, just lies when it wants about language rights. So at the time when they were trying to justify the onslaught on Serbia over Kosovo, they were flagrantly lying, like the Albanians were not allowed to use Albanian, that they were being forced to speak in Serbian, or that education in Kosovo was, it's mandatory Serbian. Total lie, complete and absolute fiction. And yet Clinton, when he was justifying on the day on he announced the impending bombing, he talked this absolute garbage about that the Albanians are not allowed to speak Albanian. So they make this stuff up when it suits their purpose, but when it's real people who are prevented from speaking Russian, well, hey, that's good. What do we care about the Russians?
That's right. The Western world doesn't believe that Russians have human rights at all.
No,
at all.
No, not at all. Okay. Meet the press. And then Cynthia asks again, what, if any, is the justification for U.S. companies, whether they are making weapons or not, to conduct business in a country embroiled in a war? Surely these companies know that since war damage is financially incalculable, no insurance provider will cover them for losses incurred during wartime.
Well, going to that story, I have no idea if it's true or not. Is it just a manufactured story fed into the media? I just don't know. Okay, I seriously doubt the foreign minister of Russia knows if a coffee
Right.
producer was hit. Okay,
Right.
my explanation, George seems to concur with me. Yes, there's a lot of collateral damage in the fact that this is a drone war. This is a missile war. This
Right.
is a war that's very much fought in the skies. And when you destroy missiles and drones and all these things, they fall down. Okay.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
sorry about the coffee maker, but the question is absolutely right. It's a war zone. What do you expect?
Right. That's right. Um, so I want to just before we finish, well, because we were talking about Ukraine and we talked about Hungary. So during the celebrations of this independence of Ukraine, um, the subject of this Druzhba pipeline, this attack on the Druzhba pipeline,
Which
came
means friendship, everyone. Friendship.
exactly. And so here was let's just watch this. What happened when uh, Zelensky was asked about this?
Після ударів справедливості по дружбі і вашої розмови і прохання до Дональда Трампа, чи з'явилося у нас і у вас відповідно більше важелів впливу на Віктора Орбана, зокрема щодо його зняття вето з відкриття переговорних класів?
Ми завжди підтримували дружбу між Україною і Угорщиною. А тепер існування дружби залежить від позиції Угорщини.
So that is Zelensky saying with a smirk about
Smirk.
well, it's about it all depends on what Hungary's position is. So this obviously, this Peter Szijjártó, the Hungarian foreign minister, wasn't too happy about this response, and he tweeted out. Let's look at this tweet. Zelensky used Ukraine's national holiday to threaten Hungary. We firmly reject the Ukrainian president's intimidation. We regard sovereignty and territorial integrity as fundamental values of international politics. That's why we respect every country's sovereignty and territorial integrity and expect the same in return. In recent days, Ukraine has carried out serious attacks against our energy supply. An attack on energy security is an attack on sovereignty. A war to which Hungary has nothing to do with can never justify violating our sovereignty. We call on Zelensky to stop threatening Hungary and to end the reckless attacks on energy security. And then he got a response from Andrei Sibia, and he says, I will reply in a Hungarian manner. You don't need to tell the Ukrainian president what to do or say and when. He is the president of Ukraine, not Hungary. Hungary's energy security is in your own hands. Diversify and become independent from Russia like the rest of Europe. And then
Wow, that's a real sovereigntist there. Yeah,
exactly. Stop attacking our energy security. This is not our war. Now, it's kind of interesting there because essentially Ukraine is admitting, yeah, we're targeting this because we want to hurt Hungary. And he's doing it openly with a smirk and knowing he's not going to get punished for it by the EU, even though Hungary is supposedly a member state of the EU and would expect the EU to defend it.
Another reason why Ukraine sees, the EU sees Ukraine as a darling because they're going to help with regime change in Hungary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So we didn't get time. I wanted to talk about. There's an interesting article about all the ceasefires that Netanyahu sabotaged. I think there have been about 7 ceasefires that Netanyahu managed to ensure that they never took hold. So whether it's the Biden administration or whether it's Trump, Netanyahu always makes sure that that there are no ceasefires. But if you bring that up, you could be
Well, I'd say Donald Trump, you do this all at your own peril. your own legacy, and don't underestimate the impact this is going to have as we go through this next invasion, a military operation against Gaza. The world is watching, and Donald Trump, you are linked to this. You're handcuffed to Netanyahu in this horrific crime of this century. And I'm never going to relent on that. Okay, I try to be balanced in looking at one issue after another, but this is just an abomination.
Yeah, no, that's right, and that's why, as we've discussed before, Trump's claim that somehow he deserves a peace prize because he brought peace between Cambodia and Thailand, and peace between Congo and Rwanda. He's going to be judged on Gaza and Ukraine and Iran.
And
That's no one, no one cares about what you did between India
it's
and
those three:
Yeah.
Gaza, Ukraine, Iran. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Most people in the Western world couldn't find Cambodia and Thailand on a map. Okay,
and wouldn't even know that. Yeah,
Trump.
exactly, and wouldn't even know that. Was there a war? I must have missed that. They would say, that's what most people wouldn't know about.
George, I mean, if you're a frequent visitor to antiwar.com, which I am, there's some good stuff there. Yeah, every once in a while, tensions have built up against the Thais.
Right. No, what I mean is that most people
come across it all the time, but it's always kind of low level.
Right. No, but what I mean is that most people, if Trump tells them, "Hey, I brought peace between Cambodia and Thailand," they will say, "I didn't know that there was a war." I mean, that's how they would respond. So,
well, it's no coincidence that his White House is pushing this. Okay, I mean, he never mentioned any of this during the campaign.
No.
Because he knows it's I don't know if you saw it. Emmanuel, what's his name? Was Obama's.
Rahm Emanuel.
I got the names backwards.
Right.
Whoa. He's saying, the Democratic Party's decided to move on this, okay, and half of the Republican Party, 35 and younger, are not on board with their president on this at all.
No.
I mean, the support for Israel is dropped through the floor. Really.
That's right.
Okay, it's a huge, huge political liability, and those in power better be careful.
That's right.
It's the first genocide televised. I mean, live streamed. I mean, what else?
That's right. Anyway, Stone River, thank you very much for your generosity. Really appreciate it, and I think that brings our podcast to a close.
Okay, well, very informative. If somebody podcast by George and his Serbian friend. I'm not a Serb. Okay.
No, he was referring to a podcast I did yesterday.
Oh,
I
apologize.
No, he wasn't referring to you. I don't think anyone thinks you're a Serb. Anyway, thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody who joined us. Thank you, of course, for all of your really interesting comments and questions, and above all, to those who put something into the tip jar. That's going to, we know Buddy and Apple are plotting something, and that's never a good sign. So, just keep them happy. All right, but there's something in the tip jar. So, settle down with the plots. Anyway, thank you. We will be back next Monday, the same time. And then you can join me for my solo. Please join me tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Until then, all the best. Bye-bye.